As we know, in Jewish law, there are two types of mourning, two types of hilchos avelos that we have. One is the avelos for someone who, God forbid, has lost a close relative, a parent, a spouse, a child, a sibling. And then we have the public avelos for the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. It has been pointed out that halachically, these patterns of mourning move in two opposite directions. When chas v'shalom someone has a private avelos, it starts off very, very severe. You sit Shiva, and then after Shiva, we have a Shloshim, a 30-day, which is a bit more Mekel. And for most relatives, after the 30 days, it's all over. For father and mother, there's a more limited avelos for 12 months. But the whole tahalich, the whole progression of private mourning is to go from the more chamor to the less chamor. When it comes to the annual mourning for the Churban Beis HaMikdash, we move in the opposite degree. We start off relatively light with the 3 weeks. Again, on many Sfardim, there's Bechlal, no particular halachas associated with the 3 weeks. Then we have then we have Rosh Chodesh Av, the 9 days. Then we have the week of Tisha B'Av. Then we have Erev Tisha B'Av, and then it reaches a crescendo with Tisha B'Av. The Avelis goes from the Kal to the Chomer. Why by private Avelis we go from the Chomer to the Kal? And public Avelis, we go from the Kal to the Chomer. And the explanation that's given is that psychologically, the two forms of Avelis serve very different and opposite purposes. With private Avelis, a person is so overwhelmed with their loss that their life is literally destroyed. They can't go on. They're paralyzed with grief. And Avelis is a mechanism that allows a person to have an inner healing so that eventually, la'at, they will be able to join society. So we start off during Shiva, the person doesn't leave their house, people come to him. And then after Shiva, the person begins to reintegrate into society. And the ultimate goal of private Avelis is that eventually a person should continue to live and not be overwhelmed by their grief. One never forgets one's tragedies, but one can compartmentalize it so that life goes on, because it is the ratzon of Hashem that we not be paralyzed with grief. It is the ratzon of Hashem that we continue to live. But be'avonoseinu harabim, with the Churban Beis HaMikdash, the opposite is the case. As we heard earlier, how many of us cannot get up in the morning because grief overwhelms us, it paralyzes us? That I need some type of ritual to take me out of my grief so I can live a normal life. It's lahepech. We go on and on as if there's no problem at all. And we are so emotionally distant from the Churban Beis HaMikdash that we don't even know what it is that we lost. How can a blind person who has never seen color appreciate what it means not to have color? A person that was born deaf, how will they even know what it means not to hear music? We've never even had the experience of nevuah, of hashras hashchina, of closeness to God that the Beis HaMikdash represented. We don't need a ritual to help us overcome our grief. It's fakert, it's exactly the opposite. We need to eventually move from our apathy and our indifference so that perhaps by the physical symbolism of deprivation, not cutting our hair, not listening to music, sitting down on a bench, perhaps, the physical behaviors we engage in will inculcate within us a sense of loss. So it's very simple. In the case of private Avelis, the chamor is natural. You naturally feel tragedy. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to help you get out of it. So we go from the chamor to the kal. With the Avelis of the Beis HaMikdash, we have no feeling at all. And the goal is therefore to give us a shemetz, a little bit of feeling, so that perhaps we could be misabel. But the truth of the matter is, mourning is not just about the past. Chazal tell us that Mashiach is born on the very day of Tisha B'Av. The day of the Churban Beis HaMikdash, the day of the Siluk HaShechina, is the day of the birthing of Mashiach. Maral explains that this does not necessarily refer to an actual birthday of the flesh and blood person who will be Mashiach. The flesh and blood person could have his birthday any day of the year. but it means that the spiritual koach of Mashiach comes into the world based on the mourning, because when we mourn, we show that we care. When we mourn, we show that we yearn to be close to Hashem, that we yearn for the Beis HaMikdash. And it is the very yearning and pining and ishtaikakus for Geula that brings the power of Mashiach in the world. The more we want, the more we desire, the more HaKadosh Baruch Hu will come back into the world. And therefore, the day of Tisha B'Av, the day that is set aside, not only for the particular Chorban Beis HaMikdash, but again, as we heard, for all of the tsaros that have happened because of Siluk HaShechina. We bring Mashiach into the world by the depth of our yearning and by the depth of our mourning. The Gemara in Shabbos tells us that after 120 years, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will ask us a number of questions, and one of those questions is, Sipisa li Yeshua. And Sipisa li Yeshua does not mean, did you believe in Mashiach? All of us will answer for sure. But Sipisa li Yeshua, did you eagerly hope and wait and yearn for Mashiach? There were tzaddikim who would get up, besides Tikkun Chatzos, they would get up every half an hour in the middle of the night, every night, to ask, is Mashiach here yet? Is Mashiach here yet? That's how they felt. How yearning for Mashiach every time, yearning for a world of Devekus B'Hashem, yearning for a world of clarity, yearning for a world in which we had the gift of Nevuah and the Kirvas Elokim, as David HaMelech said, Kirvas Elokim li tov. It is only closeness to God that matters. So when people ask the question, why do we have a Tisha B'Av? I mean, after all, one question is, Baruch Hashem, Eretz Yisrael is built up. And people ask another question. What are you mourning about Tisha B'Av? Let's have a fast day for the Holocaust. Let's have a fast day for pogroms and the Crusades and all sorts of tragedies that numerically perhaps more Jews died in the Holocaust. Perhaps, although the Gemara has interesting numbers. But again, the short answer is, when there's Histalkus HaShechina, when there's divine presence that's left us, we become vulnerable to everything. Tisha B'Av is the Yom Avelis of Klal Yisrael. That is why in the kinos of Tisha B'Av, you will note, we don't only talk about the Chorban Beis HaMikdash, although most of the kinos do. There are kinos about the Crusades. In recent years, Gedolim have put in kinos about the Holocaust, because all of those sorrows are interconnected. It's not just the temple was destroyed. It's a Siluk HaShechina. Our world is different. A world with the Beis HaMikdash is a different world. But there is a passage in the Talmud Yerushalmi that's very, very sobering. The Talmud Yerushalmi says, any generation in which the Beis HaMikdash is not rebuilt is as if the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Now let's think about that. One might have thought, well, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because the earlier generations were Rishayim, they did tremendous sins, and we're not as bad as them, but we don't have the special zechus that it takes to get the Beis HaMikdash back. That's how one might have understood this. The Talmud Yerushalmi says no. If the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed for certain reasons, and we don't have it back, we must be guilty of those same reasons, because if those reasons wouldn't still exist, the Beis HaMikdash would be rebuilt mimela. And to put it another way, the destruction of the temple was not a past event, but every single second we are redestroying the Beis HaMikdash. We are throwing our fire onto the wood and onto the stones. We are being machriv the Beis HaMikdash, because if we don't have it back, by definition, we are responsible for the Chorban, because the Yerushalmi says, any door shalo nivne biyamav ki'ilu nechrava biyamav. As a result, it behooves us very much to look at Tisha B'Av not only as a day of Avelos, a day of mourning, a day of sadness, but a day of introspection, a day of resolve, a day of building, a day of asking ourselves, how can I rebuild the Beis HaMikdash? And the truth of the matter is, what is the Beis HaMikdash? When the Torah introduces the idea of a Mishkan a tabernacle. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe, V'yasu li mikdash, build for me a sanctuary, v'shachanti b'socham, so I will dwell in their midst. And Chazal say, the pasuk does not say, v'shachanti b'socho, I will dwell in the building, but I will dwell, Hashem says, in the heart and the soul of Am Yisrael. The Beis HaMikdash is a symbol not of a Shekhinah dwelling in the Mikdash, but of a Shekhinah dwelling within us. And as a result, when our heart and our soul are no longer pure enough to contain the Shekhinah, the Beis HaMikdash becomes a simple building that anybody could destroy. The Medrash Eicha tells us, then when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, he was miskaya, he was boasting, he was proud. He said, I destroyed God's house. And God's answer was, sorry, I don't live there anymore. I left. When the Shekhinah could no longer be within Bnei Yisrael, I left. So yeah, you could destroy the house I used to live in, but I don't live there anymore. So when we talk about the obligation of building a Beis HaMikdash, we're not talking about bombing the Temple Mount and getting rid of the mosques. We'll have to leave that to Mashiach, according to the Rambam. But we are talking about making our heart and our soul a repository for the Shekhinah, because when there is, just as v'yasu li mikdash v'shachanti b'socham, we can also read the pasuk in reverse. V'shachanti b'socham, when I am dwelling in your midst, v'yasu li mikdash, then there will be a Beis HaMikdash. So our job is v'shachanti b'socham, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring, according to the Rambam, Mashiach will build the third temple. According to Rashi, the third Beis HaMikdash will actually come down, min hashamayim, but not before v'shachanti b'socham. So what do Chazal tell us? All of us know the well-known Gemara in Yuma, that the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of avodah zarah, idolatry, gilui arayos, sexual immorality, shvichas damim, murder. The second Beis HaMikdash, the Jews were relatively righteous. They kept mitzvos. They learned Torah. But the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of sinas chinam, because of hatred, polarization, disunity among Am Yisrael. And the Gemara goes on and says, Bo ura'eh, come and see the first Beis HaMikdash that was destroyed because of avodah zarah, gilui arayos, shvichas damim, the worst averos in the Torah, the three averos you have to give up your life before you transgress. And the Churban B'sach HaKol was 70 years. And then we came back and we had a Bayis Sheni. But the Churban that comes because of sinas chinam, already in the time of the Gemara, it was 1,000 years, or almost 1,000 years. And now, how much more? The year 70 was the Churban. It's now the secular year, 2015. Almost 2,000 years. Sinas chinam. And if we apply the Yerushalmi that says any generation in which the Mikdash was destroyed is as guilty as the duration of the Churban, I don't think we need to prove from a Yerushalmi how much sinas chinam is present in Am Yisrael. The polarization, the divisiveness, the indifference. Sinna does not have to be you're insulting somebody, or you're throwing rocks at somebody, or you demonize them. There can be cold sinna as well. The sinna of indifference, the sinna of not caring about people who are outside our clique, outside our group, not regarding other Jews as having chashivas or importance. The Netziv writes that even a religiosity l'shem shamayim can be a manifestation of sinas chinam. When you look at other Jews with other shitas and you call them apikorsim or kofrim, or as people often say, those who are more religious than I, those to the right of me, are fanatics, and those to the left of me are apikorsim, heretics. It is where I am, whoever I am, that is b'diyuk, the right place. And the Netziv says, this was the Churban. of the Bayis Sheni, the sinas chinam of the Bayis Sheni. So we live in a world where we divide Klal Yisrael into thousands and thousands of little mini groups, in which each group looks at the other. Chazer, treif, no good. And, unfortunately, sinas chinam becomes contagious. Because Shlomo HaMelech writes, Kamayim hapanim el panim, kain leif ha'adam li'adam, as water reflects the face that you show it, so the heart of a person reflects what is shown to that heart. If I look at water, I put my face in a reflection of water. If I smile at the water, I get a smiling face. If I frown at the water, I get a frowning face. This is what the pasuk says. So the heart of a person will mirror back what you show that person. You look at that person with disdain and with hatred, or with coldness and indifference, they will look at you the same way. You look at a person with love and with respect, they will feel that same way about you. So sometimes you might ask yourself, so why do I have to be the first one to start that? Let the other person look at me with respect and I'll like them. Why do I have to be the one that starts? Well, as the saying goes, life is not always fair. But if a person is a Ben Torah, and a person is a Shomer Mitzvahs, and a person takes God's responsibilities seriously, then we do what we have to do, whether the other side, whoever the other side is doing it or not. And we have to start. It has to start with people who believe in Torah, who believe in mitzvahs, who believe in Geula, who believe in Mashiach. And we start. And if we start, the Chacham Mikol Adam has promised us, Kamayim el panim, the love and the care that we show others will come back to us. And you have to start. Otherwise, all you continue is the cycle of sinas chinam that has already dragged down. You know, Josephus was a Jewish general, and he was kind of the Benedict Arnold. He surrendered his army to Rome, and he lived out the war against Rome. He lived in Rome. But he wrote an history. He wrote an eyewitness history of the Churban. And obviously he was living in Rome, so a lot of his observations are a little jaundiced. We can't accept them. But he quotes Titus Harasha. Titus Harasha was the Roman general, who later became emperor, but the Roman general who actually destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. And he quotes Titus, who was observing the infighting among Jews in Yerushalayim. And Josephus quotes him as saying, you know, I really don't have to destroy this city at all. If I just wait long enough, the Jews will do it themselves. Now, I normally would not trust anything Josephus says about Titus, but in light of our Chachamim's observation of sinas chinam, it's quite believable that that was actually said. So this is something we have to think about. You know, when we think about becoming more frum, we think about zealousness, we think about religiosity. So we think about, correctly so, learning more, davening more, being more meticulous, being more passionate. But somehow, we never include in our fiery passion, to have a fiery passion of Avas Yisrael, to have a fiery passion of Makabel Kol Adam B'Sever Panim Yafos. That should also be part of the fiery passion to become a better of Eved Hashem. It can't be that the more religious we become, the more denigrating we are of others. It can't be, because that is moving against the tikkun of the Aveira of sinas chinam that can bring Geula into the world. So we have to think that side by side with the zealousness and the bren, the fire that we have in our learning and our davening and our mitzvahs, we should also include a bren for the mitzvah of Yahavta l'reacha kamocha. And as the Baal Tanya says, even people who have ideas that may not be acceptable within the framework of Torah, there is still a concept. You love them even if you hate and must disagree with the idea, because you love the godliness within them. You love the goodness within them. But if that is true, even for ideas that are against Torah, kal v'chomer uben beno shel kal v'chomer. It has to be true for other shittas which are not keneged Torah, they're just not the particular hashkafa that a person has. Whether it's Torah im derech eretz or Torah umada, or whether it's dati liyumi. These might be ideas that are not totally makubal in the world of the yeshiva, and we have to follow the shittas that we're taught and the hadracha of our rabbeim. But why with bitterness? And why with exclusion? And why with demonization? And why with creating fences, even though there is so much in which from Yidden, agree upon and share? Is this not also sinas chinam? So there's much that we have to think about. The tsaros that certainly we face in Eretz Yisrael, the polarization of religious and secular, the problems with the draft, tremendous problems. And they come because of the Churban Beis HaMikdash, indeed. But I would add, it's not only the Churban Beis HaMikdash that causes the problem, but the reason for the Churban Beis HaMikdash causes the problem. Sinas chinam. One other point, I want to quote another Gemara. The Gemara in Nedarim gives another reason for the Churban Beis HaMikdash, which is very strange. It says the Churban Beis HaMikdash occurred shelo berchu b'Torah techila. They were learning Torah, but they didn't make the brachos before the Torah. And because they didn't make the brachos before the Torah, we have the Churban Beis HaMikdash. Very strange Gemara. Is the Gemara talking about the Bayis Rishon, or is the Gemara talking about the Bayis Sheni? It's very clear that the Gemara is talking about the Bayis Rishon, because it said they asked the Nevi'im what was the reason for the sin, and the Nevi'im didn't know. There were no Nevi'im by the Churban Bayis Sheni. So it must have been the Churban Bayis Rishon. But if that's so, it's a pella. The Gemara is asking, why was the Bayis Rishon destroyed? Because they didn't make Birchas HaTorah? The Bayis Rishon was destroyed because of Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayos, Shvichas Damim. And they asked the Nevi'im, and the Nevi'im didn't know what the sin was. The whole book of Nevi'im is filled with what the sins are. The Nevi'im certainly knew. That was their job. So how could the Gemara identify a relatively minor prohibition called Lo Birchu B'Torah Techila as a reason for the Churban, if indeed for the Mikdash Rishon the reason of the Churban was Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayos, Shvichas Damim? And Rav Elia Lapian offers a beautiful interpretation. Chazal knew, not only Chazal, the Nevi'im knew 100% that the actual Averos that caused the Churban Bayis Rishon are Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayos, Shvichas Damim. They knew that. That is beferish. But their question is a meta question. It's a question above that, and that is, given the fact that Yidden were learning Torah, why didn't the Torah elevate them? Why didn't it protect them? How could it be that a person learns Torah in the morning and then in the afternoon commits Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayos, Shvichas Damim? It's like saying, you had a good morning Seder, and then you go out in the afternoon, you murder a few people, and get back in time for the afternoon. That's their kasha. How could it be that the Torah that they learned didn't change them, didn't elevate them, didn't make them a different type of person? And on that, the answer is, Lo berchu b'Torah techila. How is that an answer? If you remember in the beginning of the book of Malachim, when David HaMelech was towards the end of his life, he was covered with garments, and the garments gave him no warmth. He was cold, he was shivering. And Chazal say, the reason is, if you treat clothing with disrespect, the clothing will not help you later. And David HaMelech, when he was being pursued by Shaul, at one point cut off a piece of Shaul's garments. He showed disrespect to garments. Therefore, they did not, even a different garment, did not protect him. So Rav Elia says, what do you see from that Gemara? That which you treat with disdain, even an inanimate object, is not going to help you when you need it. So Rav Elia says, if it's true that if I'm a vaza es habagadim, I don't get warmth, then if I'm a vaza the Torah is not going to help me. Lo bercha b'Torah techila, therefore, is the following. By not blessing Hashem for the Torah, That shows an attitude that they considered the Torah a burden. They didn't consider it a gift. They didn't have passion and geschmack. It was something they did because they had to do it. But they didn't treasure it. They didn't cherish it. They weren't machshav it. So the Gemara doesn't mean it was because of that sin that the temple was destroyed. But because they weren't machshav the Torah did not elevate them. It did not purify them. And as a result, they could commit the sins of avodah zarah, gilui arayos, shvichos damim, which was the actual reason of the Churban. The musar to us is that if we want our Torah and we want our mitzvahs to purify us, to elevate us, to make us a different type of person, it is not enough to simply do these things superficially. But we have to learn to appreciate the gifts that Hashem gives us, to look at our Torah with simcha, with joy, with slavos, with enthusiasm, with geschmack. Because otherwise, chas v'shalom, we fall under the category of mavazeh HaTorah. If one is mavazeh HaTorah, then even if you do all of the learning that you're supposed to be doing, in the afternoon you can do avodah zarah, gilui arayos, shvichos damim. So these are some things we think about, a day of cheshbon hanefesh. And the one thing I can say once again is to conclude with Chazal's statement, that if we take these matters to heart, if we think about being mesaken sinas chinam, if we think about being mesaken lo birchu b'Torah techila, if we yearn for the Beis HaMikdash, if we try to understand and try to visualize what it is that we're missing, which is very, very hard, then indeed, as the Maral says, that will be the power that will bring the koach of Mashiach in the world. That will be the day that Mashiach is born. And as the Navi Zechariah says, that day of the 9th of Av will become a day of sasein v'simcha. May it be b'mheira v'yameinu. Amen.